Hi everyone, this is Himanshu Sehgal, partner Octavus Consulting. We are once again here for the June month's Insight Corner. So, like every month, we come up with a new topic and we do a deep dive on it, do our analysis on it, and then share that with you. This month we have gone a little overboard and maybe off the script also. So every month we were covering either therapy areas or indications or conferences. But this time we have tried to take an approach which is more strategic in nature and a topic which is more it's a combination of two things, regulatory as well as which plays a vital role in a product strategy. So you can see it on my screen. We are talking about regulatory designations where for this Inside Corner, we have focused on US FDA and EMA for obvious facts because these are the two big markets. Uh, but but we obviously cover at a global level. We do the analysis at a global level. Um, okay, so without further ado, on in terms of giving more introduction, let me just take you to the next slide. So, what are we going to cover? In this Insights Corner, we are going to first talk about the regulatory landscape and the pathway architecture, impact of the designations on the drug development, as well as the success stories, basically. We will also talk about, the the FDA novel drug, landscape specifically. Then why I said that regulatory designations or designations are key part of the strategy of a product. So, we're going to talk about that. And lastly, we'll talk about the impact of designations overall in the as a regulatory framework and as well as overall as an pharmaceutical market, what kind of impact it's going to bring in. It's going to be in 60 minutes or more or less 60-minute video. We'll try to compress it as much as we can. So bear with us, but this is an interesting topic and yeah, if you need the presentation, feel free to download it. Moving on, these are our previous issues. We are now 1 year, 1 month old in terms of Insights Corner. We are bringing in these insights since May 2025. So last month, when we did our gene therapy, we completed 1 year, 12 uh, issues basically, and we have a bonus issue of the one big beautiful bill as well. So this is our basically 13th issue of Insights Corner. Now moving on. So yes, sorry. So you can access these all these Insights Corner once if you download our recent file, which is this designation file. You will get the sources for all these other previous issues of these designations. So you can use one file to download or view or read the other issues as well. Moving on. Now, before I do more, I would like to introduce Shubham. Shubham is the person behind, or I would say a man behind this version of Insights Corner. So he has worked on this deck and created the insights. So over to Shubham, and he will start the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Himanshu. And good morning, everyone. I'm Shubham Verma. I am here work as an analyst in Octavus Consulting. And without further any delay, let's start with executive summary. So, like the 4 points that I want to address in this whole deck is the first one is the standard timelines that are too slow for today's pipeline. So, as you all know, in today's scenario, companies cannot afford 8 to 9 years of regulatory processes for approval of their drug molecules. Now, in the areas of targeted therapies that serve very small patient population, the standard timeline for the drug approval pathway is simply infeasible and very ineffective. So this can be solved through designations. How can it be solved through the designations? Like designations help companies through adaptive trial designs, faster reviews, and commercial incentives to speed up the process and get approval as fast as possible. Second point that I want to highlight is the pathway differences between the US FDA and the EMA. Like the US FDA is more flexible. It is accepting early stage results with real world data, while EMA that requires more rigorous studies. And the third I want to address is the designation trends. So, in designation trends, the two most highlighted designations that are in currently headlines that are making headlines in current scenario are the ODDs, that is the Orphan Drug Designation, and the RMAT, the Regenerative Medicinal Advanced Therapies. So why are they making the headlines? The ODDs, as you all know, are currently the safest, most rewarding pathways as they are offering near retention rate with 7-year market exclusivity along with other various benefits like fee waivers and tax credit incentives. While RMAT is growing at a phenomenal rate of 354% approximately, which is in itself reflecting a rapid growth in innovative therapies like these cell and gene therapies, the targeted product therapies, tissue therapies. And the third point that I want to bring your attention to is the business impact of it, which is the most significant of all these steps for us in this designation, like how it designations affect the business strategy, how it improves a pathway and the approval process for a company who is looking for approving a product and wants to launch a market the product in the market. So if you look at the business impact, the stacking value of the designations, its strategic value is what we are looking at. Like if you combine the orphan drug designation with BTD, which is breakthrough and priority review, you can actually bring approval of the market to in and launch the product before the standard timeline. Let's say if a standard timeline has 8 to 9 years, so with stacking of the product and depending on what kind of stacking you have did, you can compress that approval period 2 to 4 years with alongside $100 million value life cycle value of the product. You can save up to that and boost multiple merger and acquisition premiums in regard to priority vouchers and all that. Now, the fourth that I want to emphasize on, it's the reforms, which is the structural foundation of the designations and what reforms are reshaping in this 2026 era, that is in current year. The most important one is the catalyst orphan exclusivity reversal that opens blockade of rare diseases markets to competition. And PRV, that is the priority review voucher program, which is extended to 2029. As before this, it was till last year 2025. Now it has been extended to 2029. Then EMA Prime has now been made mandatory for pre-submission checkpoints. What this means is like in EU, different companies, when they were going for submissions of this prime designation, there were several irregularities in their submissions, which often leads to decline or withdrawal of those submissions. So now EMA has made a mandatory checklist of these submission requests. And the last is the psychedelic drug therapies that have been fast-tracked by executive order by the FDA. So overall, these are were the main highlights of the executive summary and of the whole deck that we are going to present. Now let's move to the first section of our deck, which is the regulatory landscape and pathway architecture. What it encompasses is the strategic importance of the designation, how and different overviews of FDA, EMA, and the comparison. So let's move on to the first topic, which is the strategic importance of US FDA and EMA designations. So here I want to talk about that designations are a special status granted by regulators, whether it's FDA in US or EMA in the Europe, to therapies targeting serious conditions and unmet needs. They are accelerating the development and review of the process and not lowering the bar and the safety of the product as such. Like what I want to say is, like designations are there to provide the acceleration and review process of the drug approval, and not they are not in any way are going to affect the safety or efficacy or all those clinical aspects of a drug molecule in its whole process or pathway. The most important thing in this is, as I have previously also discussed in the executive summary, is the divergence in the pathway approval processes between the FDA and EMA. The FDA, which is increasingly flexible, often accepts real world data, while the EMA, which is generally demands larger, more comprehensive data with a longer follow up period. So, when a company is trying to have a global product market which it wants to launch, it has to navigate both these and have to come up with a strategy that works in both the scenarios, not just FDA, since FDA is a little bit easier to get a designation, while EMA, as you can see, it's a little more bit comprehensive, requires a longer follow-up period, so more data, rigorous data is required in the EMA. We can understand it with this example of like EGFR mutant, the next generation inhibitors of in oncology pipelines that we do. Like in lung cancer, for highly targeted oncology pipelines such as next generation inhibitors for EGFR mutant advanced lung cancers, the standard 10 to 15-year development life cycle is too slow. These therapies target specific patient subsets, meaning traditional large scale trials are often unfeasible. Designations provide the regulatory flexibility needed to utilize adaptive trial designs and novel biomarkers. The third point that I want to reflect on is the harmonizing of the cross-border strategy, because the EMA requires consensus across member states. So early engagement through Prime helps sponsors structure their clinical plans. This ensures that data collected from investigators and key opinion leaders across key European markets, such as Italy or Croatia, will hold up under centralized EMA scrutiny. So this was all for the strategic importance of designations. Now, if Himanshu wants to add something, he can. Over to you, Himanshu.
Thank you, Shubham. No, I don't want to add this anything else to the slide, but now let me just take you back to this slide where uh, here we are trying to get into the basics of US FDA designations. So a couple of things, and then I'll not go into a lot of details, but on this slide, we are trying to codify the core of US expedited tools like FTD, fast track designation, BTD, breakthrough designation, priority review, ODD is your orphan designation, and the accelerated approval. So each of these are strategic questions which we have asked, that how fast can we go? Like, in terms of priority review, FTD, how early can we file, in terms of accelerated approval, and how defensible is the indication if we win. So, ODD exclusivity, basically. The thing to note here is that when to apply window, basically, like kind of a thing. Like when to apply is I feel is the important part. Why? Because, like, for example, they kind of serve different purpose. Each designation serves a different purpose. Like FTD and BTD are essentially done in the development, uh, early development part of the drug development process, which is like in the early stages, which is uh, IND towards and going towards the end of or mid of, I would rather say, phase two. Whereas priority review is attached to the marketing application, right? And ODD is pursued as early as if it is like a first in human kind of a planning, basically. So if you have a first in human kind of a drug, you go for ODD, um, uh, file for the ODD designation, basically. So one very good example I can just think of, and it is a recent one, basically, um, is about sacituzumab, basically, which is Trodelvy. Um, it got approved in TNBC, triple negative breast cancer. Though the program used breakthrough designation, priority reviews, and was approved under accelerated approval. And this product got approved based on a single arm phase two data in terms of response rate and the duration of response. So if you look into the normal scenario, response rate and duration of response are not our regular endpoints. Basically, the approvals usually happen in terms of overall survival, median overall survival, PFS, and then a couple of other things. If it is early stage, then maybe EFS and all those things. But in this specific case, it got approved on the response rate and then DORs, basically. Right. Um, so we have seen in this slide, we can see that uh, the approval is not just based on the on the KM curve, basically, but it's an approval of the designation story, basically. So for instance, early stage oncobiotechs, basically, they they frame their valuation and go with the pathway, a realistic path of BTD plus ODD and priority review, rather than just doing a phase three, which I just told you as an example in sacituzumab, basically. Right. So having said that, and again, you can review this slide later on and let us know what your thought process is. Moving on. Now, beyond designation, there are FDA has so designation is already special, right, from a regular pathway. But now we have special designations, basically. So special designations are special pathways, basically, which have been created. Here we are not going to talk about our classic designations, which we just spoke about. These are more specialized programs. These are not actually calling them a designation would not be a right thing, though they are designations, but not right thing. But these are more of like programs which are created by FDA and the regulate and the government of America, basically, right? So in terms of now let's talk about specialized, they add a specialized layer to it. So RMAT is for regenerative medicine. So if you're developing a regenerative medicine, RMAT is a program for you. If you are developing a pediatric drug into a rare disease, then it becomes RPDD, which is rare pediatric disease designation, becomes a program. Priority review voucher, very specialized program. I'll talk about it. QIDP for infectious diseases. RTOR is basically oncology review. It's a real-time oncology review program. And then Project Orbis. Again, both RTOR and Project Orbis are for oncology. I'll also draw your attention towards program which is now not in operation anymore, but it was a very famous program few years back, which was Project WASPEED, which was created during the COVID times for the approval of COVID vaccines and treatment programs and so on and so forth. Right. So now coming back. What's common across them, all these programs, is that either you can buy your time you can buy your time by market exclusivity, compress review cycle, right? Or open up global or multi-agency review, like Project Orbis, basically, which is an multi-agency review in terms of oncology drugs, basically, or oncology segment. So all of which becomes a negotiation lever in the BD and co-development deals, basically. So whenever you're going for for deals, these designations programs become your assets or negotiation powers, basically. Now, again, some couple of anecdotes and an examples if I talk about, um, like for example, I was just talking about RMAT. RMAT has become a go-to badge, basically, or go-to designation for cell and gene therapy companies. Sponsor use it to get phase two like data accepted for approval, right? They get with BTD, they get FDA interaction, intensive interactions, basically, but tailored to CMC. Long-term follow-up become reality, very realistic in terms of cell and gene therapies. On even on the financial side also, like I was just talking, I mentioned about priority review voucher. So this is a very specialized program. Like for example, it you even supports you on a financial terms. We have seen that companies trade. So other programs, other designations are not non-trainable, tradable, sorry, not tradables. But priority review voucher or PRV is tradable. So, you save money, you get the refund when if you get a priority review voucher. So you apply for priority review voucher, you get it, you will get your return money. But also another thing what happens is that you can sell your priority review voucher to another company, like for example Zevra. Zevra as a company sold their RPDD PRV, so a rare pediatric disease voucher designation priority review voucher for $150 million in 2025. And there have been vouchers which were sold for approximately $350 million also. And this becomes, a tool to finance your pipeline, basically. One such example was that this was something which I was working on while I was with Novartis. That we bought. I was working for a product which was in, I think, phase two, and at that point of time, and we bought priority review voucher from a very small pharma biotech company, basically. So yeah, I have seen it firsthand being used. Now, art, RTOR, RTOR, and Project Orbis are becoming, uh, you know, very hot topics in terms of oncology launches. Like again, I'll take the same example, Trodelvy, for its UCC, urothelial carcinoma, used RTOR, uh, and they have combined it with FDA's assessment aid, basically. Uh, and they got approval in 6 weeks, 6 weeks ahead of time, sorry, ahead of time under priority review, basically. So this increased you know the speed of approval, and obviously this got approved very fast. Now moving on, without I'll try to summarize it faster. I know that contrast and so EMA has a lot of contrast and always and also a complement to the FDA review system. On the EMA side, basically, the toolkit looks very as a concept, it looks very similar to FDA, but structurally they are different. Like for example, orphan drug designation, if we compare it with the ODD in the US, the difference is here in EMA you get 10 years exclusivity, uh, accelerated assessment, conditional market authorization. Uh, Right. Prime designation and approval under exceptional circumstances, right? Where FDA may lean into flexibility and RWA, EMA is more formalized basically. Right. So when I talk about how formalized that, like for prime eligibility, conditional approval in exceptional circumstances all require uh, pre-planning basically. So with CHMP and repertoires basically. So repertoires, you can think it like a you can take it like a homework basically for you guys that to read about repertoires. But with every approval, there are different repertoires basically. Now, classic pattern, if we see a sponsor, meaning FDA approval on surrogate endpoint, they use EMA conditional marketing authorization to bridge into the Europe side. Um, uh, and then on a parallel or on after it, after the approval, they go for confirmatory trials basically. This usually happens in oncology and rare diseases. Then we talk about Prime. Prime is all Prime has become a brand of its own basically, like in terms of Europe. S- Small biotechs come, they use Prime grant plus BTD in the US, and then they become a dual badge basically, like two badges. And then this is used usually for the partnership or for merger acquisition, especially, I mean, in a nutshell, to increase your valuation basically, right? So recent examples have been neuromuscular disease and an IgA nephropathy have gotten few primes basically. Now I think, yeah. So I think now I'll move. I'll give it to Shubham to explain the next couple of slides. Over to you, Shubham.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu. So in this slide, we are basically discussing the comparative differences and their similarities between the US FDA and EMA's different designations. So, like the first one is on the rare disease policy, which has the US Orphan Drug Act that has been around since 1983, and the EU since 1999. So the key difference between these two is that the prevalence under 200,000 US inhabitants for the eligibility criteria for orphan drug designation, and the EMA uses a prevalence rate of 5 in 10,000 in the EU. Now, both offer the fee reduction and market exclusivity, but the FDA gives 7 years, while the EMA gives 10 years for market exclusivity. Now, the second is the accelerated regulatory review. On this front, the FDA priority review comprises the review clock from 10 months to 6 months, while the EMA's accelerated assessment does something similar from 210 days down to 150 days, which is approximately 5 months. The eligibility bar at the FDA is significant improvement in safety or efficacy for a serious condition, while in the EMA's case, it's major public health interest and therapeutic innovation. Both are meaningful, but the FDA framing is slightly narrower since it only focuses on the improvement of drug safety and efficacy, while EMA in general goes on the much broader scope of like therapeutic innovation and much bigger public health interest. Now, on the third point, which is that preliminary approval. The FDA's accelerated approval is in use since 1992, allowing approval based on surrogate endpoints with confirmatory trials post-approval, while EMA's equivalent is conditional marketing authorization valid for 1 year and renewable, also requiring post-authorization commitments. Both are pathways to early commercialization, but both come with strings attached. Now let's move on to the next slide. Uh, Here we have another point, which is the expedited drug development, like breakthrough designation in US FDA and the prime designation in the EMA. So like the breakthrough designation, which was introduced in 2012, is for drugs treating serious conditions where there is preliminary evidence of substantial improvement over existing therapies. While the benefits go beyond fast track, you get meetings with senior FDA staff, adaptive and efficient trial designs, guidance, and intensive engagement throughout the development with senior FDA officials. The, on the side of the Prime, it was launched in 2016 with a similar kind of a role. It's for drugs addressing unmet medical needs with meaningful improvements in clinical outcomes. Prime gives you early rapporteur appointment, which is to say that it gets a EMA designated officer for you to help in the drug process approval, which is what the basically a rapporteur appointment is all about. And meetings with regulatory experts, as I've just discussed, and eligibility for accelerated assessment. The critical point in this is that the prime is essentially extremely selective. Like it, as you will see in further deck, it the prime that the companies receive is almost around just 10 in the whole years, while breakthrough designation is approval is much higher. It also has a special program, exceptional circumstances under EMA, which has a comprehensive, which is for that those rare diseases whose comprehensive data cannot be obtained in s- through normal or simple pathway processes. What it gains or it benefits or it has a merit on is that approval for treatments that normally would not qualify for regulatory approval under standard requirements. Now let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so now here we have a different section, which is the impact of designation on drug development and regulatory success. Here we discuss about how the designation actually impact the approval processes of drug, how it effectively translates into the success of those eventually for company's benefit. So in this slide, we are going to discuss the drug development timeline, which is the strategic and designated pathways. So the first one, as you can see, is the standard pathway, which you can see as the standard process from the discovery clinical to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Then we have an FDA review of 10 months. And after that, we get an approval. Total timeline that it takes from the IND to drug approval is 8 to 9 years. While when we look at the orphan drug designation, though it has the same pathway process, but you get certain benefits in this, like tax credit benefits of about 25%, and from phase one, fee waiver, around 7-year market exclusivity. The FDA review timeline is here based more or less the same as the standard, which is the 10 months, or if it gets tagged with the priority review, it comes around to 6 months. But the timeline for approval is the same as that of standard. With if you get priority review, it comes down to 7 to 8 years. For last designation, you have the discovery preclinical phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, FDA review and approval. The interesting thing here is you get the rolling review, which what does it mean? That FDA reviews your data in real time as it comes in. So by time you formally file your NDA, the FDA has already reviewed 40 to 60% of your submission. So that comprises the real review window significantly. Now we have accelerated approval, which is the most, you can say, unique one among all the different pathways, as you can get a conditional approval at phase 2 or at early phase 3 based on a surrogate endpoint. You still run phase 3 post approval as a confirmatory trial. Time for approval from the whole IND to the drug approval is around 5 to 6 years. And you can see the trade-off of this pathway, that if the confirmatory trials fail, then the approval can be withdrawn, as we will see further in the slides in the case study of Trodelvy. Now, if you look at the priority review, the priority review drops your approval pathway review timeline from 10 months to just 6 months. It has shortened your FD review timeline, but as in this case, it's always the same with let's say approximate time for IND drug approval is around 6.5 to 7.5 years. The last one that we are going to look at is the breakthrough designation. In this, you also have a FDA rolling review, which does the same thing as you get around 40 to 60% of the submission pre-approved and through the FDA. In breakthrough designation, you also get all the fast track benefits, all the intensive FDA guidances and adaptive design. Now, in breakthrough, you are looking almost similar to what fast track designation's timeline approval, which is around 6 to 8 years from IND to full approval. But it dramatically reduces the risk of complete resistance letter as it has intense FDA. Over to you, Imanshu.
Now we have, in this we have spoken about the standard versus designated pathways. Now let's talk about the success stories or success rate across, regulatory pathways basically. So, here in couple of next slides, we are going to talk about how this data basically shows, in the actionable, what should we even apply kind of a guidance basically, right? There are multiple designation, how you apply it, and then so on and so forth. Now, a couple of things like here, what we are trying to do is here we are trying to quantify that that not every expedited designation is an easy money. Fastest designations requests have climbed from 117 in 2014 to 300 in 2024, but approval rates have dropped around three quarters from three quarters to if I'm not wrong, 2/3. As FDA has become more selective in basically right. Now, another thing is breakthrough designations are even more selective. Only about 41% of the requests have been granted across between the 10 years of 2014 to 2024, basically, and denial plus withdrawals making up the majority. So 59% basically. So this is no longer a nice to have ask. Nice to have ask kind of a data. It does not rely on mediocre data basically. If you have exceptional data, then only you will be granted a breakthrough designation or a fast track designation or any other designation for that matter. We have seen, at least I have seen multiple mid-cap oncology company very silently step back from their BTD request after a mock review basically, which shows that they could not demonstrate a substantial improvement over standard of care. A failed BTD request can actually color future interaction with FDA reviewers basically. So that's why what they do is they silently just go back, withdraw their applications, right? Conversely, when when a BTD is granted, it becomes a valuation event. Several in next few months we will be also talking about merger acquisitions. We'll have another insights corner related to deals, and then for that, when we are collecting data, we got to understand that in the M&A case studies basically, the premium has the premium for the either M&A or licensing has jumped between 20 to 40% after BTD was granted. And then you can see that also while in terms of, when companies are raising fund, as soon as they get BTD, they go for fundraising or IPO immediately after these designations, after BTD basically. The reason is you get oversubscribed, overpriced basically, and our premium pricing basically. So yes, there is a negative side to it also. There are success stories. There are withdrawal stories also. So So the idea is to tell you that the process has become stringent, basically, right? But with that stringent process, there are things like a lot of companies have even now the BTDs and FDDs, the number of approvals have obviously increased, right? Now, moving on to the second part of is, talking about ODD. So here I would like to emphasize on the high yield, low risk kind of nature of this path, basically. Orphan drug designations stand out as a high yield, low risk pathway. The designation almost doubled from 231 in 2014 to 475, which is literally double in 10 years, basically, while withdrawals have dropped from 81 to just 6, which is like, uh, 95% of retention or right. And RMAT is following a similar trajectory for regenerative medicine. Uh, with grants have increased threefolds since 2017. I think yes. So yeah. So this was introduced in 2017. So since 2017, three times it has increased. Approval rate has climbed up to approximately 55% with low withdrawal rates, basically signaling that high quality CGT programs are being awarded, right? So um, if I convert it into a business development conversation, we increasingly see pharma companies specifically asking that is the asset ODD eligible in at least one high value subsegment, basically. So they are thinking about that if we can get a subsegment, high value subsegment ODD, it would be easier for them to, expand the market afterwards, basically. So not just only about 7 year exclusivity, but also ODD has bring in de facto quality filter for rare disease strategy, basically. Now talking about RMAT, RMAT is critical in several high profile gene therapy like gene therapies in hematology and ophthalmology. Companies have used RMAT platform to renegotiate or negotiate their trial endpoints, reported outcomes uh, in the mid stage of the trial ongoing and without derailing their timelines, basically. So in between, they have gone with and spoke to FDA and then changed their outcomes, basically, which would have been difficult and time consuming when you talk about a standard IND application, basically. So if you talk about a normal IND application, if you have to go and renegotiate on your timelines or renegotiate on your endpoints, you have to pause the trial, go to FDA, talk to them, waste another 6 months or time if everything goes well, then 6 months of time, and then come back and restart the trial or something like that. So yes, these have obviously increased, or the successes are definitely there, basically. Now let's talk about the success rates among the other uh, EMA. EMA has shown that they are very selective, but again, they are very rewarding as well, basically. So for EMA orphan drug designation, submissions have dipped modestly from 269 in 2022 to 211 in 2025, but approval rates have risen. So approval rates have risen while withdrawals have fallen sharply, which indicates that even companies are now becoming cognizant of obviously, this also shows that as well, that companies are being very cognizant of when to apply. But uh, they are going into the self-selection mode, or introspection kind of a mode, basically, within themselves, right? And Prime remains extremely selective. We're talking a low double-digit designation annual versus 200 plus orphan designation. So underscoring that it is reserved for genuinely transformative or very breakthrough kind of therapies, and that's why it's called prime basically. Now, um, couple of examples which come to mind or anecdotes which come to mind is sponsors are now typically run an internal prime readiness review. So again, from first-hand experience, there are I mean, it's like companies like Novartis, Pfizer, and so on and so forth. Not just the big ones, even the smaller ones. They do their prime readiness reviews internally. If they don't have robust early data plus clear differentiation in their story, in their business stories, they will often delay applying for prime and face a negative signal, right? And then rather go for a regular scientific advice first, basically, right? For business development, prime badge on top of ODD in Europe is materially influencing. So we have spoken about deals, and then similar to what breakthrough designations and all for the US. I think Prime is the biggest badge of honor, and if you combine it with the ODD, it becomes one big amazing thing. And for ex-US licensing deal, it is a gold mine basically. Any companies can go for. Now moving on from here. So yeah, here we will be talking about the novel drug approval landscape for US FDA, and I'll again pass it on to Shubham for to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu. Now let's move on this topic, that is USA FDA designated novel drugs. Now, what this slide shows is that FDA novel drugs approval that they received due to various designations in 2025. If you look at this slide, you can see that oncology dominates this landscape. Like NSCLC, you can see there are many drugs with like Bizarre Pharma or for Winger Ingelheim or even AbbVie. They all have NSCLC as their accelerated approval designations. All these approved molecules got those designations. Even in breakthrough also, you can see the same molecules that they have like AbbVie and the Alpha, Baker. In fact, Bayer also got these. So what this shows is that oncology dominates this designation space since it is an unmet need area that reflects broader industry trend. Second, you can see if you want to look at the rare disease section also, which is also well representative, like with Barth syndrome, this IgA nephropathy, and FCS, sorry, which is that familial chylomicronemia syndrome. These are ultra rare conditions where standard pathways would never work. It is only possible through designations that they got approved. Because in standard pathway there are too many obstacles to tackle through. Whereas with designations, as you can see, it's or suppose let's take an example of FCS, that is familial chylomicronemia syndrome. It got breakthrough designation. So what happens here is that with they get a special intensive FDA program with senior officials. They get rolling reviews. So even after phase by phase, their processes, all their submissions get reviewed, and if there is any guidance that is needed, FDA comes through and it gets approved accordingly with those processes. If you see, the one thing that is to be noted in this landscape is the Anicora, that is the Campylobacter, which is the Acacio Bio. This is the only Chinese associate asset that is you can find in this whole landscape, which you in a way shows you the trend that how Chinese once we are familiar with them as origin manufacturers of generic and biosimilars. Now they're increasingly coming up with innovative molecules and therapies and are giving the competition to US and European companies and are producing FDA approved, like the quality is FDA approved for these molecules, and they can become a global competitive competition. They can become a global competition for these uh, American and European companies. Now, if you can go to the next slide, that's more approval landscape that we can talk about, which is uh,
Okay, so Shubham, before we go to the next slide, I want to also add some context here is that, you
yeah,
know, there are, I think, close to 25, 26 molecules on this slide, basically within the two designations. And out of those, 14 or 15 are orals, basically,
yes,
right? So this is also an interesting trend to see that in terms of uh, approvals, if you see that orals get or being applied for more designations, and I think one reason behind that is the convenience, patient's convenience, and then obviously it becomes an unmet need. Another, I would like to point out, I think a mistake here, Shivam, uh, that for Keytruda QLEX we have used IV, but it's supposed to be SC, I believe. So QLEX is an SC formulation. I think we have just missed that, so maybe we can correct it afterwards.
so here you can see the major chunk of this landscape is here in this slide, amongst distributed amongst priority review and fast track designations. Now, the few highlights worth calling out here are that the hereditary angioedema that has appeared multiple times, which is a rare life-threatening condition, with multiple companies competing in this space for this disease and its approval. And second, you can see is that hemophilia A and B indications, which is a companies have come out with a subcutaneous formulation for this hemophilia A and B, which was historically an IV formulation. It was used to be given IV. Now companies have come up with an subcutaneous. Another you can see is the generalized myasthenia gravis, again a rare indication. It, this shows that a genuine therapeutic competition is there in rare disease. Or and you can also see multiple other indications like breast cancer. There is tenosynovial giant cell tumor. There is a multiple myeloma, AML. So all these indications have gotten some designation one way or the other to have them got approved in the process much early than which would have been rarely or let's say difficult for them if they have gone through the standard pathway process. So the gist of this landscape that what I was trying to portray is that if a drug treats a serious unmet condition and the company knows that its data is its data is complete with no problem, so you can always have a designation pathway for them, which through which they can apply to get an early approval from their products and molecules so as to launch their product in the market.
Yeah. So again, before you go on to the next
Yes.
slide, again, another quick trend. Obviously, we are seeing again oral at the multiple stages or multiple indications basically.
Yes.
But another thing which I want to share or show the audience is the practicality of combining multiple designation. So you see, if I go on to the previous slide, basically. So if I go on to the previous slide, you see that Regeneron's molecule, linvoseltamab, is has got an accelerated approval, right?
Yes.
It has got priority review and it has also got fast track designation. So this is like a clear example of combining multiple designations to get a faster approval, easier approval, and then obviously bringing and increasing the access of the medicine to the patient. And there are multiple examples to it. There is Comzifti, there is Emrys,
Yours,
Amrelis,
Embrace,
and
Dozy.
then many more. Iptrozi, and then couple of more, which are Imavi. Yes, you're right. Imavi is also there. Like for same in myasthenia gravis, it has got fast track designation also and an FTD also. So yeah, thank you for bringing this up, and moving on to the next slide.
Yes, the next slide, this next section is about regulatory designation as a strategic asset, like how these designations actually help companies in their approval process, in their overall business strategy, so that they can, over the end goal of a pharma company is to be profitable. So how these designations actually help those.
I think I'll take over it, on this one, right? Uh, yeah. So mm, this is your designation as a strategy, not as an admin kind of slide, basically. So what we have done is here we have tried to use Pfizer as a case study, right? And in a company to which has got we have looked into the history of the designations it has got. Um, Right. It looked into the history of the designation, like from January 2020 to May 2026, and we can very clearly see that there are, 5 BTDs, 6 FTDs, 7 ODDs, Prime 1, Priority Review 7, RPD, and AAs basically. So this is like a landscape or a dashboard basically, but what it signifies basically. So a diversity of big pharma companies using designation as a deliberate portfolio uh, lever across the oncology, infectious disease, autoimmune, neuromuscular, and cardiometabolic assets basically. So you can see a healthy mix of OTDs, all these designations. I'm not going to name it again, with a slight bias towards US FDA pathways basically. This reflects that it is a US first regulatory and commercialization strategy. So this is one very important thing, that there is definitely a biasness towards US, obviously, because of the market being big and right. In a deal discussion, Pfizer and its peer frequently highlight designated assets as the spearhead of their growth narrative. For example, a gene therapy program with the ODD RMAT priority review becomes centerpiece of their R&D strategy, of their R&D day, because that ticks both scientific and the financial boxes. So if you go and we as an analyst, we do it very often, that we look, or what we listen to the R&D days, quarterlies, or investor bank conferences basically. So yeah, this kind of ticks the boxes, and they talk about that. If you listen to them, you'll notice this basically. Another interesting and angle is the modality and the route of administration. In this Pfizer's case, Pfizer has a mix of biologics, small molecules, plus it is spread across route of administration. If I talk about, is spread across like IVSC oral, and this is not accidental. This is all about balancing the CMC and access risk, while still maximizing on the eligibility of the expedited pathway, like our RMAT and the BTDs basically. Right. So how each designation serve as a as a company strategy. So stacking up FTDs, BTDs, priority reviews in a strategic way. So you know one, it becomes a competitive moat basically, right? This is this is about basically um, how competitive you are basically in terms of scientific data, and then obviously financially as well. I'll obviously talk about this with an example also, but yeah, it becomes a one is a competitive moat. Then it becomes a financial strategy basically. How it becomes a financial strategy is because you get a 25% tax credit on clinical trial cost, right? 7-year exclusivity, which is which could worth up to or at least we have taken a very conservative approach, but $100 million plus. But I would say in few cases, in terms of blockbuster products, or in those kind of cases, it has gone beyond that as well. It is near to in some cases it has gone near to the billion also. Right. So then again, investor and M&A kind of, so BTD alone has raised acquisition premium, which we have spoken earlier. BTD plus ODD programs have consistently command 2x to 3x IPO valuation. Again, we have used that same analogies or same in the past slides as an example. Operationally, Operationally also it makes sense. Why? FTD ruling review means FDA has already reviewed 40 to 60% of the NDA before the formal filing date and compressing the review time basically. So PR clock kind of, if you talk about the PR clock, it reduces to the 6 months time basically. BTD makes US FDA as a co-founder or a co-developer of the product, because you get to interact with the FDA multiple times in the BTD. So and then probably as a small startup or a small clinical stage company, you cannot hire those minds which are there with FDA basically. Those are the pioneers of the industry, and they kind of give you advices, and then they become your part of your team in one way basically. So that is um, um, you know that's an added advantage. And obviously if you combine it with the or analyze it with the data of CRL data, which was very recently published by FDA, it shows that the companies who have gotten designation, they have lesser CRLs basically, especially if we talk about FTDs and BTDs basically. Now, moving ahead, we have again another case study basically, which we are trying to uh, uh, you know anchor this whole story which we have brought in front of you in last 1 hour with a story of Trodelvy, right? So here we use Trodelvy as a concentrated example. So they stacked up BTD, fast track designation, priority review, and accelerated approval, and compressed time from the promising phase two data basically. So basically they compressed. For one, they did not have to do phase three study and get the data and then get an approval. After phase two, they directly went to for a launch, obviously after an approval in TNVC basically. So same product also illustrates the flip side. Its accelerated approval in metastatic UCC granted on response rate was later withdrawn after failed confirmatory trial. Another example from oncology only, it comes to be Lynparza. That was also one example. So it is also a reminder that accelerated approvals is conditional, and they have their downsides also basically, downside risks also basically. So Trodelvy is a first anti-TROP ADC basically, gained accelerated approval in 2020 for heavily pre-treated TNBC, basically using a single arm phase two study. Uh, and this also shows, I don't want to use the word, but uh, there was a very big vacuum in the in that segment of heavily pretreated metastatic TNBC patients, that FDA was willing to go for a phase two study and get a give an approval basically. Now, in terms of urothelial indication, urothelial carcinoma, it leveraged the R2OR assessment date to get an approval within 6 weeks. I'm sorry, 6 weeks ahead of the FDA PDUFA date, basically, which again showcase the process level innovation can help you reduce down the same clock within the 6 months, basically, right? So strategically, companies now routinely build scenarios, plan like Trodelvy style expansion, basically using one high impact accelerated approval to enter into the market, then layer additional indications via Orbis, R2OR, and they also stack up different designations while being very clear on confirmatory trial execution risks, basically. Right. So those are that's what I wanted to talk about to Delvi. Now, moving on, regulatory development and then impacting the designation. Uh, so these are the regulatory reforms which has come in. We have just spoken about in last 6 months of 2026. So I'll not go into the much details, right? But the orphan drug catalyst precedent was overturned. The change was which was published on February 3rd of February, basically. Then there was rare pediatric PRV program reauthorization, again announced in February, and so on and so forth. So basically, you can psychedelic. Shubham has already spoken about the psychedelic drug prioritization policy. And the permanent integration of prime scheme, basically by EMA. So here also you can see that there is a partiality and biasness where we have used 3 FDAs and 1 EMA. Right. So yes, life is not fair, and then so is not the FDA and EMA. So yeah. So I think we'll conclude it here. Right. And once again, uh, about Octavus, we are an evidence-based strategy consulting. We work in 3 spaces. If this is something which you know you or your company requires, uh, we can help you and support you. You please feel free to reach out to me or Rakesh if you want this presentation. You don't want to download it from the website, you want this presentation in your inbox, feel free to reach out to me or Rakesh, or you can reach out for any of your requirements. As a giveaway, we are giving away 20 hours of analysis work, um, um, completely complimentary. So feel free to again reach us, and we'll be happy to extend the support. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Shubham, for working on this, creating this. It was really insightful, at least for me. I don't know about others who all knew what, but for me, it was insightful. So thank you so much.